Hi everybody and welcome to my final simulation presentation for Challenge 6 for Business 514 Operations Management. My name is Nathaniel Forey and I'll be guiding you through the results that I got for this Week 8 challenge. My first strategy was based on the best results that I got from challenges 1 through 5. For batching decisions, that meant that I chose 4 share a table from open to 7 p.m. From 7 to 8 p.m., I chose tables of 8. From 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., I chose 4 share a table. And then for dining time decisions, I chose 46-minute average dining time from open to 7 p.m., 46-minute average dining time from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., and a 75-minute average dining time from 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. For bar decisions, I chose a ratio of 79 bar seats to 11 tables. And for my advertising decisions, I chose a 1.5 times normal budget, happy hour advertising strategy, and a 5 p.m. restaurant opening time. For my strategy 2 settings, the batching decisions were open to 7 p.m. tables of 8, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. also tables of 8, and from 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. also tables of 8. For dining time decisions, I had 45 minutes from open to 7 p.m., 45 minutes from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., and 65 minutes from 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. I reduced the dining time for all 3 periods in strategy 2 because I noticed that customers were waiting an excessively long amount of time to get into the dining area. My bar decisions remained at 79 bar seats to 11 tables in strategy 2, and my advertising decisions in strategy 2 were a 2 times normal budget, happy hour advertising strategy, and a 5 p.m. restaurant opening time. Strategy 3 included adding further revisions to what I saw didn't work in strategy 2. So, batching decisions actually remained the same because I didn't see any issues with this. From open to 7 p.m., it was still tables of 8. From 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., it remained tables of 8. And the same goes for 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. For my dining time decisions, these also remained the same, being 45 from open to 7 p.m., 45 from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., and 65 from 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. However, I did increase the number of dining tables in strategy 3, the proportion of bar seats to dining tables now being 63 to 13. This was to allow lower wait times and an increased amount of customers seated and buying dinners as opposed to being stuck in the bar. Now, I also made some adjustments to the advertising decisions, raising the normal budget by 2.2 times, but I still used the happy hour advertising strategy and the 5 p.m. opening time. So that is my strategy 3 revisions. I found that my revisions were very successful for each iteration of my strategies, and that meant that the optimal strategy was strategy 3. I developed strategy 3 as an incremental revision of the first 2 strategies. So in strategies 1 and 2, I saw that there was an unnecessarily long wait time at the bar and many multiples of 8 people that could fill an entire table and start purchasing dinners were stuck in the bar and unable to be seated. So I decided that run 3 should increase the amount of restaurant seating to 63 bar seats and 13 tables, and this meant that 16 more people from the bar would be able to be seated and ordering meals when they would have been forced to wait to be seated in run 2. I saw this as an unnecessary inefficiency. Also, since run 2 benefited from a larger advertising budget for the happy hour period, I elected to increase the advertising budget again slightly in run 3 up to 2.2 times in an attempt to maximize profits in the final run. Now, this was the change that I was least certain about making because from challenge 5, I saw that advertising budgets can be a very volatile and unpredictable thing. So just because increasing it by 0.2 times is good in a certain iteration, increasing it by 0.2 times again can have a catastrophic decrease in price, but then increasing it after that could be positive again. So I was the least confident about this decision. However, it did pay off in this run. So now I'll go a little bit deeper into some of the results that I got in strategy 3. There were 168.45 drinks sold on average and 418.15 dinners served on average. The average customers in the bar were 6.11, and the max amount of customers was 38.85 on average. The average wait time was only 6.62 minutes, which is a major strong point for strategy 3. And the max wait time on average was 31.1 minutes. There were only 4 lost customers on average, and the average drinks per customer was 0.55. Now, the average revenue per night was $4,434.17, and the average nightly profit was as high as $608.18. We see that the average utilization was 60.39%, and the average tables in use was 7.95 as well. Moving on with our strategy 3 results, we see that the total number of dinners served completely eclipsed the number of drinks served. This shows that people are efficiently being moved out of that bar into a seating area where they're able to purchase dinners, which are going to bring the business more profit than the drinks are. This is a major strong point for strategy 3, and it's also reflected in the decreased wait time that I mentioned on the previous slide. Now, the customers lost, as I mentioned, very low and only slightly increased for that finishing period from 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., which might be because of the increased dining time during that period of 65 minutes. However, we do see that during that 65-minute period, people are buying more dinners and drinks, so it's really not clear to me whether decreasing that amount of time would have actually increased the profitability. So because the customers lost was only 4 on average, and that increased dining time for that final period may attract a different type of customer, and they may purchase more things because they're allowed to be seated longer, I believe that this was still a very ideal choice to make. Here, in the final portion of the strategy 3 results, I have included the performance measure comparison from the appendix of my paper, so it might look familiar to some of you. I'm going to touch on all of these performance indicating metrics, and then on the next slide, I'll dive a little bit deeper into that financial comparison between the 3 runs. So, for the average nightly profit, we see that the first strategy produced $430.62 on average. And this was dramatically increased with my revisions in run 2, which brought $607.35 on average. And in run 3, the difference was positive, but not that large, producing $608.18 on average. So we see that by putting in the top choices from challenges 1 through 5, I still was able to produce a positive average nightly profit, $430, which is respectable. But when I was able to see the way that all of those decisions from the previous challenges interacted with each other, I was able to augment them and make them a lot more efficient to bring the average nightly profit above $600. Now, in run 3, I was also able to make some modest adjustments, but it seems that I capitalized the most on what I learned from run 1. Now, the total revenue for strategy 1 was $3,631.66. The total revenue for strategy 2 was $4,521.40. And the total revenue for strategy 3 was $4,434.17. We can see from run 2 to run 3 that the total revenue actually went down. So the fact that the total revenue went down, but the average nightly profit went up, indicates to me that the business is actually running much more efficiently, to where a greater proportion of the revenue is profit. This is especially impressive because the advertising budget is actually higher in strategy 3 than in strategy 2. So there are a lot of other ways that the business is saving money by not having partially filled tables or a bar that is overly full as well. For lost customers, we see a steady improvement from run to run. We began with 12 lost customers on average. In run 2, that was 9. And the biggest decrease was in run 3, where lost customers was only 4 on average. Utilization is interesting because it is 59.22 for strategy 1, 71.3 for strategy 2, and 60.39 for strategy 3. So runs 1 and 3 are actually very similar, and run 2 had a much higher utilization. I thought that was interesting, and one of the only times where run 2 is more different than runs 1 and 3. Usually 2 and 3 are the most similar. So for average tables in use, in run 1 it was 8.75, in run 2 it was 7.93, and in run 3 it was 7.95. Moving on to tables served, we see that the average table served was 52.1 in run 1, 50.3 for run 2, and 52.75 for run 3. So we're serving the most amount of tables in run 3, which also contributes to that high average nightly profit. Now, finally, for average wait time, that's 40.21 in run 1, so very large wait time, but it was nearly cut in half in run 2, down to 23.5. But that difference does not compare to the difference in run 3, where the average wait time was all the way down to 6.62. This was one of the greatest improvements that I was able to make over the 3 runs, and a significant improvements to the customer experience, as you can imagine. So that was one reason that I chose strategy 3 as the most optimal here. Here we can zero in on that profit comparison that I mentioned before. We can see that there was a dramatic improvement from run 1 to 2, and a slight improvement from run 2 to 3. And as I mentioned, the total revenue for runs 2 and 3 were much higher than in run 1, which seemed necessary for their profit increase. But the total revenue in the most profitable run 3 was actually lower. And not to spend too much time on that because I already talked about it, but that indicates that this business is running more efficiently. Now, to summarize how some of those metrics prove that strategy 3 was optimal. Strategy 3 was the best of challenge 6, producing $608.18 per night on average, despite having higher advertising costs and slightly less total revenue than run 2. As I mentioned, this indicates that the expenses were lower and the business was running more efficiently in run 3. Furthermore, one of the greatest improvements from run 3 is the efficient dining experience that it provided customers. Run 3 had an average wait time of 6.63, as opposed to 40.21 and 23.5 in runs 1 and 2 respectively. Run 3 also had only 4 customers lost on average, compared to 12 and 9 in runs 1 and 2 respectively. Now, here's my reference page, and I'd just like to say thank you to those of you who chose to view my presentation. I hope that you were able to learn some things about my process, and I'll be interested to see how your guys' results compared to mine. Thank you very much.